Okay, quick video on how to set up location services, both the location service object in the network policy, as well as what needs to be done on the planning tool to make sure that that data is plotted out correctly. So once we get into the Hive, the first place we're going to want to go is to configuration and then our network policy. So we've got configuration, and then you're going to pick whatever network policy you're working with. From here, we'll scroll down to the bottom underneath additional settings and edit that. And then we want to expand management server settings. Inside of here, we have the location server. And if you have an object already created, you can go ahead and use that. The default settings will be fine. If you don't have an object, I will hit the plus sign here to create one. It's early, I can't type. And again, we want to use the Aerohive location server, make sure it's enabled, and utilize these settings. All of this should be the default when you hit the plus sign. Go ahead and save that and just make sure that's applied here. We'll want to make sure we save here again and save one more time, and then make sure we get the network policy was updated successfully message here. Once we've got that, that will enable locationing services on the access points. Again, once we push this out to the EPs, that change underneath the additional settings should be able to be pushed out as a delta, so real time without needing to reboot the access points. And just to show you that again, if you're to either click on configure and update devices here or click the continue button to advance on in the wizard, we'll get to the screen to where you can update your APs, and I don't have any online right now, but you just want to make sure that you select the APs you want to update, go to update, update devices, and from this screen, do not check this box. Leave this unchecked so that it doesn't perform a complete upload before it's a delta. And then again, in this case, we don't want to do any firmware upgrades. Now, before we push that config change out, go ahead and just apply the the locationing service policy or object underneath the additional settings. Hold off on updating the APs until we make map changes or make sure we don't need to. So now we'll come underneath maps, and so that'll enable the APs to start reporting that data back to Hive Manager. We just need to make sure that we have APs placed on maps correctly. So drill down to your location, your building, your floor, however you have that laid out. Make sure you have an image in here. Two things are really important. One, make sure that we have scale. So if you haven't scaled the image, you'll get this little pop-up window here asking you to. If you have scaled the image or you need to rescale it or you didn't get the pop-up, just come right here to your scaling tool. Pick a spot. Typically, I would ask that you use an exterior wall or a much longer wall than a shorter wall so that our scaling can be accurate. Keep in mind that we're dealing with pixels here, so a few pixels, you miss a few pixels. That's actually quite a bit scale off, and a good example of that is to use a door frame, which is common. If this is all you have, the door frame, that's fine. Standard 3 feet or so. But if we line that up and then zoom into about 300%, oh, didn't work. Well, instead of showing you the issue, just make sure that you zoom in there and get your door frame aligned up as well as you can. Change it from meters to feet and update. And you should see that the scale will adjust across here. Once you have your image scaled correctly, then you want to go ahead and simulate your walls as well. So make sure that you get the wall types as accurately as they can be there. And then you can start to place the devices. So to utilize this as a real-time report, you'll want to come to devices and then select the available devices, and you can assign them here. You can also assign device locations from either the configuration and all devices location or the monitor tab and all devices location. You can select multiple of those, modify them in batch, and then assign them to whatever map you want. So you can either do it from there or from the planning tool. The last thing that we need to do to make sure that the data is being plotted here correctly is come over to View and then Operations and go underneath Global Settings. So because the planning tool can be used for a pre-deployment predictive planning as well as post, we need to make sure that we have calibrate heat maps turned on and use heat maps for location. The enable AP parameter validation for location is optional, and usually I turn it off. What this does is it just draws a kind of a dark blue line between the AP's coverage cells to kind of help you understand where a roam between APs may occur. Its accuracy, I don't know. I've never really tested it much. If I'm testing roaming, it's looking at an image isn't going to be enough. We need to actually have data coming through. So I don't typically rely on it, but if you want to see the extra visual, you can go ahead and check that. The two important ones are calibrate heat maps, use heat maps for location. I will usually shrink my refresh interval down to the lowest minimum, which is 30. I believe the default is 120. And that's just, that will help speed things up as far as how long it's going to take to start seeing that location data and then how often it's refreshed, obviously. For the thresholds, and I've been playing around with these, so I'll set some defaults for you. For the thresholds, I usually go, I want to do 64 on the threshold for location. And then the calibration range, I will typically do 40 or 35. 40 is the lowest we have, through about 74, right? We don't want anything past that, really. It's going to be inaccurate, and the client should be pretty far away from the AP, and then 40 is about as tight as we allow it. You've got the ability to change how things are overlaid there as well. And then here, your minimum RSI requirements for location. You can set those. You also have a couple options to only use the most recent, which is going to be more accurate data. But this will also take more time to get that data into Hive Manager. So you could also consider to use previous reporting measurements over a period of time that may be less accurate or incomplete, but will start to somewhat plot out a client's location. And the minimum measurements here for the location should be 3. 2 is not going to be very accurate. And the reason for this, what we're talking about, is triangulation, right? Or multiple APs seeing a client device and being able to report on that. You really need 3 to plot that out. And it gets a little bit more complicated when you start talking about accurate locationing. So out of a 3, which to me is minimum, 2 of those APs, and this is going to sound crazy, 2 of those APs need to hear that client. They need to be on the same channel. So both APs would need to be on channel 6, and they would need to be able to hear that client on channel 6. And then that third AP needs to be on an off channel and doing background scanning to potentially hear that client as well, sending probe requests just out to everyone, and then use that to plot. So you need 2 APs on the same channel, 1 AP off channel. All 3 client devices, or all 3 APs, need to be able to hear that client device somewhere between a neg 40 and a neg 74 for calibration. And then the threshold here that we're plotting, depending on your coverage today, I typically go with 64 because if we're doing locationing, that's what we designed to get accurate locationing, 64 or tighter. For you, where you may be more, well, we just don't really know where your RF environment is yet because we haven't looked at it. You may want to back this out to like a 70, just to give us a little bit more range off the AP as far as what's going to be acceptable for that threshold. And then once you've got that, go ahead and update. At that point, once you've updated here, you can push that delta change out to the APs to enable the locationing object. And within, I would say, an hour to 2 hours, depending on how many clients you have and how active they are, you'll start to see that data. And in addition to needing those 3 APs with those requirements, the client devices also need to be mobile so that we can plot them. If they're setting static in one place, the APs will plot the client device, but it may not be that accurate because, again, we're not getting those multiple readings from multiple points between the triangulation to understand distance as opposed to just RSSI or signal strength.